Hello everybody, my name is Senkara, and this is BAKURA'S Undead Lockdown deck, straight from the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, so of course using anime-only cards. This deck is the Cursed Twin Dolls plus Counterbalance combo, which I showcased on Tuesday, so be sure to click the card above, check that out, and let's get right into the deck profile. So, if you don't already know, the main card for this deck is Cursed Twin Dolls, also known as the Cursed Necro Twins, and Counterbalance. And, well, if you don't know how that works, I'll explain it right now. So the Cursed Twin Dolls, when this card is activated, your opponent flips a coin and gets one of the following effects. If they flip heads, then they gain 200 life points each time a card is sent to the graveyard, to either player's graveyard. But if they get tails, then all the cards in their graveyard is removed from play. Any card that would go to the graveyard gets removed from play instead, and cards cannot be sent from their hand, field, or deck straight to the graveyard. Also, all of their monsters that's removed from play counts as one monster on the field, so it goes towards the number of monsters counted on the field, and we'll get to why that's important later if you don't already know. And then, so they get whatever effect they flip for heads or tails, and then you get the other one. So ideally you want them to have the heads effect, and you to have the tails effect. That is the biggest weakness of this deck, is that it is randomly decided, unfortunately, and that was the main thing that I was trying to focus on when I was building this. I had to come up with a way to counteract that weakness, which I did, which we'll get to at the end of this deck profile. So that's the basics of Cursed Twin Dolls. Now, just to note that the actual anime text doesn't say that the cards get banished, it just sort of affects the graveyard, but I interpreted it as the cards getting banished because Bakura said that his graveyard got destroyed, and you'll notice that Yugi's life points didn't go up whenever cards went to Bakura's graveyard because he didn't have a graveyard. So I interpreted this as cards getting banished, which is important because he also actually uses Necroface in the manga. Mind you, the manga version doesn't have an effect, it's just a normal monster, but I want to include Necroface as well as Soul Absorption, and Banishing is obviously important for that. Now, we have three Cursed Necro Twins. The next important card is Counterbalance. This card is absolutely ridiculous. Cursed Necro Twins is just a stupid card overall, like, it's amazing. This card is also ridiculous when you put it together. So with this card, during each player's end phase, the turn player must send cards equal to the number of monsters on the field from their deck to the graveyard. Now, if you remember those effects earlier from Cursed Necro Twins, assuming you have the Tails effect, first of all, you can't send cards from your deck to the graveyard, so you can't participate, unfortunately. So Counterbalance just doesn't affect you. Second of all, each of your banished monsters counts towards one monster on the field, so you can have more than 10 monsters on the field at a time for Counterbalance's effect. So your opponent is just sending cards to their graveyard from their deck every turn, for each of their turns, for each of your banished monsters, and for every monster on the field, including their own. It's a ridiculous strategy. The basics of this deck for the rest of it is just boosting the number of monsters on the field. That was Bakura's main strategy. He ran a zombie Necro deck, so let's go through the Necro cards that help do that. So first of all, we got 3 Necro Mannequins. Now, I tried to include every monster that Bakura used, or at least all the Necro ones. I didn't include Disgraced Mage and, what was the other one? I forgot what it's called. Doom Caliber Knight. I didn't include those two because they're kind of useless in this deck. I mean, they had some sort of strategy with his, but they really shouldn't have been there. So this is more of a modernized version of Bakura's deck. So we got 3 Necro Mannequin and Necro Cycle. So for this card, each turn, including your opponent's turn, if you have a Necro Mannequin, you can summon another one from your deck, which is why we have 3. This is an easy 3 monsters on the field with just 2 cards. Next we have a Necro Soldier. So during your opponent's standby phase, you can special summon a Necro Soldier from your hand or deck, and then that Necro Soldier has the same effect. So again, this is a 3 monsters in 1 card, nice and easy. Next we have Necro Wall. This card I don't really get off as much. I didn't get it off at all in Tuesday's duel, but during your end phase, you can special summon a Necro Wall token for each zombie monster on the field except this card. The fact that it's except this card means that you can't just use this card on its own. You have to already have at least 1 zombie on the field, and even then it would only get out 1 more Necro Wall. So that's why I only have 1 of them. The reason I have 1 at all is simply because Bakura uses it. It's another Necro card. But as a substitute for Necro Wall, I found something even betterer. Scapegoat. That's right, Scapegoat. This card is ridiculous in this deck. This card is absolutely amazing. So first of all, it's a zombie, so it works with the deck. It's a tuna monster, so that's fun. Allows us to use synchros. and its effect is when this card is flipped, it's a flip effect, you can special summon any number of black sheep tokens to your field. They're all level 1 zombies, 0 attack and defense. So with this card, you just set this card, it gets flipped. Not only are you protected from attacks for the rest of the turn, but you also just summon 4 extra monsters just like that, which boosts the monster count for Counterbalance. So this card is ridiculous, and we run 3 of them because it's absolutely amazing in this deck. And next up we got 3 Necroface. Bakura uses Necroface in the manga, but his version is a normal monster. I'm using the effect version from real life, of course, and this only works if you're applying the banishment of Cursed Twin Dolls, which I'm fairly certain is how that works. So with Necroface, this card is ridiculous. This is one of my favorite cards. I run a remove from play deck, so I absolutely adore Necroface. When Necroface is removed from play, both players banish the top 5 cards of their deck. So yeah, this is just more deck thinning. It just causes your opponent to just rapidly lose cards with Counterbalance, Necroface, and then we're going into the jars next as well. So Necroface is absolutely ridiculous. 5 cards gone just like that. It also gets more monsters banished for upping the monster count for Counterbalance with your Necro Twins, and it could potentially banish another Necroface, causing more banishment to happen again, which is amazing. I love it when that happens. So yeah, Necroface is ridiculous. It's also our second win condition, which we will get into later. Next up, for the final of the Necro cards, and moving on to the jars, we have Necro Jar. I only have one of this card because it's not quite as good. I did actually get quite a good play off it in all the duels on Tuesday that I used it in, but it's not the best. So when this card is destroyed, it's unaffected by the effects of spells, so that's fun, I guess. But if this card is destroyed by battle, your opponent sends 1 card from the top of their deck to the graveyard for each multiple of 300 battle damage that this card's controller took from that battle. So for every 300 points of damage you take, your opponent loses 1 card from their deck. So it's just a nice little mill card. Most of the time it probably won't even get that much milled. I just happened to go up against some strong monsters when I used it in the duels on Tuesday, but unless that's the case and unless I'm close to victory with it, then I barely even use Necro Jar. I really just have him because he's one of Bakura's cards that's used in this deck. He's a Necro monster, he's pretty cool. But I much prefer the rest of the jars. So we've got Morphing Jar, which Bakura does actually use in Season 1, not in this deck, but we can assume that he has it. I mean, why not? It's perfect for this deck. So I assume you know what Morphing Jar does. My ruling is that this card does work with Cursed Necro Twins because it discards, it doesn't specifically send to the graveyard. Those are very different things in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's the same ruling as Dark Worlds. If it says send to the graveyard, it's different from discarding. So Morphing Jar still goes off. Morphing Jar number 2, I would prefer a second Morphing Jar number 1, but he's limited, so I'll stick with that. With Morphing Jar number 2, again, I'm not going to explain how this works, but I also ruled that this card works. Because it doesn't specifically send straight from the deck to the graveyard, it excavates and then sends the remaining cards to the graveyard. So I'm not sure if that actually works with the Cursed Twin Doll. Someone else can let me know in the comments, hopefully. But normally it doesn't matter because, I mean, I don't know how that would rule otherwise. Maybe you just don't get the effect off. Maybe the cards go back into your deck. I don't know, but either way, Morphing Jar number 2 is fantastic because not only is it a great deck destruction card, but it also helps you get more monsters on the field. Well, it helps you get through your monsters, and if your opponent attacks it, it helps get rid of any troublesome monsters. Like, all their extra deck monsters go back to the extra deck, and then they just lose a bunch of cards. It's fantastic. Finally, we've got Cyber Jar. Originally, I had 2 Morphing Jar number 2, but Cyber Jar is just better. But if you prefer not to run ban cards, then swap him out for a Morphing Jar number 2. He also doesn't really fit the theme, but it is a jar card, so I mean, it works. It kind of works. Cyber Jar is absolutely amazing. He's banned for a reason. You can read him yourself, but this gets you 5 cards real quick, just like Morphing Jar. It helps you thin out your deck, and it also helps thin out your opponent's deck, which it timed out due to inactivity. Well, that's rather rude, really, isn't it? Cyber Jar is great. That's the point. Next up, we have the Dark Door. This is another one of Bakura's cards, so he doesn't use it in this deck again. He uses this in Season 2, but in his Undead Lockdown deck, he uses Narrow Corridor, which isn't a real card, but Narrow Corridor is basically just a much worse version of the Dark Door, so I opted for the Dark Door instead. And this fits Bakura's theme better anyway. I don't know why they changed Narrow Corridor, just for plot reasons, honestly. Next up, we got Card Destruction. Again, this discards doesn't send from the hand to the graveyard, and it also thins out your opponent's deck and helps you search more. We've got a card of Sanctity. This card is like the stupidest, most broken card in the entire anime. It lets both players draw until they have 6 cards. So since this deck is very needing these 2 cards, or at least the one, it needs to search a lot of cards, right? So card of Sanctity, hand card Destruction, Morphing Jar, and all the pots and stuff, that's all just for searching. So is this card. Again, this is like the second most broken card in the game, straight from the manga. Bakura doesn't use it specifically, but like, I don't know, swap it out for something else if you really want, but it's amazing. So we run 3 Magician's Archive. This card is add 1 spell card from your deck to your hand. So since we're not running anything particularly like too stupid in this deck, I guess it's fine to run Magician's Archive. I mean, it helps us search for our Twin Dolls, Counterbalance, Cursed Eldland, even a card of Sanctity if we really want, but mainly the first 2. And yeah, Magician's Archive, it's stupid. Next we got 3 Pot of Extravagance, 1 Graceful Charity, and 1 Pot of Greed. Again, you can swap these 2 out for something else if you really don't want to run bang cards. Swap them out for different pots. You got Pot of Duality, Pot of Desires, or you could even go for a Pot of Avarice if you really want, or a Pot of Prosperity, something like that. Switch them out for one of them, or even 2 Reckless Greeds if you're feeling a little reckless. But anime deck, they always run Pot of Greed, so I threw 1 in. Not more than 1, because that's just cheap and you're a scumbag if you do that. Okay, so that's the draw engine and the search engine. Next we've got our second win condition. So if you remember before, I said the problem with this deck is that it's random. There is a good chance that your opponent could get the Tails effect. So what do you do if your opponent gets the Tails effect, if they get the black box? Well, first of all, their graveyard gets banished and they can't send things to the graveyard, and they can't bring things back from the graveyard because it's all banished, and so that's great. As someone who mains Macrocosmos, who runs the Remove from Blade deck, people hate their graveyard getting destroyed, right? People need their graveyard. So this is already just anti-meta in the first place. They can't use their graveyard. That shuts down a lot of decks. It does heavy damage just on its own, but it's not a win condition, and we don't exactly run a whole lot of strong monsters. So what do we do instead? Well, my idea was, if they have the Tails effect, you have the Heads effect, so you're gaining a lot of life points, 200 life points for every card sent to the graveyard. That adds up fast. Secondly, I threw in Soul Absorption, a single Soul Absorption. This is 500 life points for every card that gets banished forever. A single Necro Face getting banished, and you gain 5,000 life points right off the bat. So with this plus the Necro Twins, your life points shoot up very, very quickly. I'm going somewhere with this. Next we have 2 Eldritch the Golden Lord. So these guys are 2 level 10s, very easy to summon. Just a note that if you have the Tails effect, you won't be able to use Eldritch's, well, either of his effects at all. He basically becomes completely useless, but that's okay, because if you have the Tails effect, you've got Counterbalance, you don't need him. But if your opponent has the Tails effect, just a note, you can use his first effect, but you won't be able to target one of theirs cards, because you can't send cards from their field to the graveyard, and this says sent to the graveyard, it doesn't say destroyed, so that's a bit annoying, but you can just send one of your spells and traps. I mean, you have a lot of spares. You have a ton of spares. You don't need most of these if you've got Eldritch and Cursed Eldland ready to go. You don't need most of these, so you can target one of your cards. So we got 2 of him, and finally we got 2 Cursed Eldland. This is solely to search your Eldritch, and you can also get rid of it to use either of his effects to bring him back to life, and yeah, then it sends another one. So, what is the win condition here exactly? Well, first of all, like I said before, we have Necro Face. So, with Necro Face, when this card is normal summoned, shuffle all banished cards into the deck, and she gains 100 attack for each card shuffled into the main deck by this effect. So, since this is a deck destruction deck that has banished cards, this can jump up quite a lot. This can, if your opponent has like 15 cards, or if your opponent has, what's the number, 18 cards banished when you drop a Necro Face, then that immediately jumps up to 3,000. So that's a level 4 Blue Eyes right there, and it can get even bigger. So Necro Face, that's one option. That's a big monster. We got 3 of them, probably only get off one of them because once the cards are returned to the deck, well, it's hard to get them back. Next up, we got 2 Eldritch, a Golden Lord. This card not only clears out your opponent's troublesome cards, but you can also bring them back from the graveyard with an extra 1,000 attack. So again, big monster, hard to get rid of, becomes immune to card effects for a turn. It is pretty great, so that's a start. Now we're getting to the real kicker. Number 35, Ravenous Tarantula. This was my idea. So with Cursed Twin Dolls and with Soul Absorption, your life points are shooting up fast. And if they're not, then your life points are shooting down fast. Either way, there is very likely to be a big difference between your life points and your opponent's. So if your opponent has the black box instead of you just sick him with the Ravenous Tarantula. Which is why we have Eldritch. He's also a zombie monster, so fits with the theme, and is a very easy to summon level 10 monster. Bust out 2 of them, go into Ravenous Tarantula, and then every monster you control gains attack and defense equal to the difference between your life points and your opponent's. It's stupid. When I played this card on Tuesday, go watch that duel. I had a field full of Scapegoats and a Necro Face and Ravenous Tarantula, and just all of them gained 7,700 attack points. It was ridiculous. Necro Face was sitting on 10,700. I had 3 Scapegoats on the field, 3 little sheep tokens, all with 7,000 attack points, and a big ass spider, 7,000 attack points. So yeah, Ravenous Tarantula is kinda stupid with this deck. It works well. If you don't get the black box, absolutely fine. Go for the Tarantula, you're good to go. So to wrap this up, I will quickly go over the extra deck. I won't say too much about it. The extra deck is mainly just your backup. It helps you. It has extra win conditions. You can just win with extra deck monsters alone, of course. You've got your Scapegoat, so getting out Link monsters is stupidly easy. This is just instant Link 5 whatever. Like, you're good with Scapegoats, you can get them out nice and easy, and then you can use them to win or do other stuff. So we've got Synchro Monsters first, Ally of Justice, Catastor. This gets rid of any dark monster nice and easy. Aroma Safari Rosemary. While your life points are higher than your opponent's or plant monsters you control gain 500 attack and defense, blah blah blah. If you gain life points though, target 1 face-up card your opponent controls, and it has its effects negated. So that's pretty cool, especially when there's a lot of life point gaining in this deck. Even if your opponent has the black box, you got Soul Absorption. So you can get a Rosemary off, and it has some bonuses with that. Next up we got Geomathmech Final Sigma. That's it for the Synchro Monsters. Geomathmech is a pretty cool card. He's pretty great. Level 12 Synchro Monsters, so your Eldritch plus a Scapegoat and any level 1, including a Black Sheep token. Next for the Xyz monster, we got 2 number 35 Ravenous Tarantula. The reason we run 2 is not because you're likely to get 2 out. You're not very likely to get 2 out, but just in case you get rid of one with Pot of Extravagance, you have a spare. So don't need to worry about that. It's very unlikely you'll get rid of both of them unless you're very unlucky. And yeah, 2 of them just in case. Next up we got a Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Gustav Max, because why wouldn't you? And of course a Juggernaut Liebe, because again, why wouldn't you? This card is an OTK in itself. Finally, for the Link monsters, we got 1 Appaloosa Bow the Goddess, 1 Decode Talker, Nightmare, Cerberus, Phoenix, and Unicorn. Tobologic Zeroboros is another win condition. He gains 200 attack for each banished monster, for each banished card, so that can rack up pretty quick, and he already starts with 3,000, so that in itself is ridiculous. Very easy 5,000 attack point monster. We got a Vampire Fascinator, and finally Yuki Onna, the Absolute Zero Mayakashi, which has stops your opponent's it negates activated effects of your opponent's banished monsters, so that's pretty cool. So that's it for the extra deck. That is the Undead Lockdown deck. Yeah, that's it. So again, like I was saying when I was building this deck, the main thing on my mind was how to get past the Necro Twins weakness of the random coin flip and the effects. Of course, in the anime, it was all plotted out, so we don't know what Bakura's backup plan was. I mean, what if Yugi went, yeah, I'll take the black box, and then Bakura's just like, well, shit, now what? Like, I don't know what his plan was. Maybe it was just ram with Zoma, Disgraced Mage, and Doom Caliber Knight, maybe, but they all died, so unless he had spare Zomas, then I don't know what his plan was there. But yeah, so that was the main thing to think about with this deck, is how to counteract that downside. And it's very easy, because all you need is just your Eldritch monsters, and that's easily searchable Cursed Eldlin, which can be searched with Magician's Archive, or your numerous draw spells. So you're set to go, and if Twin Dolls goes off as planned and your opponent gets the Tails effect, then Counterbalance just for the win. They're dead in like 2 turns. It's fantastic. It's great. So that's the Undead Lockdown. I hope you enjoyed BAKURA'S deck, the Spooktober deck, Spooktacular. Leave hashtag Spooktacular in the comments, or don't, I don't know. Yeah, you know what? Do it anyway. Do it anyway. Leave a like and a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have any other cards that would be helpful for this deck, any upgrades or anything, or any substitutes for banned cards / Card of Sanctity if you think that should be banned, which it really should. And yeah. Let me know if you give this deck a try for yourself. Thank you also very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. My name has been Senkara. And until next time, see ya.